but our farmers are going to have a field day right now. So to our farmers, have a lot of fun. I love you too.
Until President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill kicks in late next year. And this is happening at the same time that many U.S. farmers are warning that they are reaching a breaking point as unpredictable weather, rising costs, and fallout from Trump's tariffs are impacting their bottom line.
A cotton farmer is going to lose $375 an acre for every acre of cotton he planted. A corn farmer is going to lose $220 an acre for every acre of corn he planted. A bean farmer is going to lose $120 an acre for every acre he planted. So you're talking last time it was between $105 an acre and $75 an acre. This time I'd say take $150 or $200 an acre to square everybody up.
America has just harvested one of the largest corn crops in its history, yet the story is not one of triumph. Instead of prosperity, many farmers are staring at the harshest financial squeeze since the 1980s. What was supposed to be a season of abundance has quickly become a season of anxiety. Across the Midwest, entire communities are discovering that planting more no longer guarantees stability. Analysts note that for 3 consecutive years, producers of nearly every major crop have been losing money, a cycle that has drained savings and eroded confidence in the future. Government data further suggests that net farm cash income between 2023 and 2024 recorded the sharpest 2-year decline since the 1970s. This means record harvests have paradoxically delivered financial pain rather than relief. At the same time, global soybean prices have dropped by more than a third in just 4 years, stripping away what was once a reliable safety valve for farm revenues. The result is a rural economy caught between falling crop values and rising uncertainty. How did America reach a point where bumper harvests bring not relief but deeper debt? And what does this reversal signal about the future of U.S. agriculture in a world of volatile markets and shifting trade policies? Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button. A simple like helps push this video to more people who need to see it. If the harvest paradox was the first shock, the collapse of America's export markets has been the second and perhaps even more devastating. Instead of expanding access to buyers abroad, trade policy choices have closed doors, leaving U.S. agriculture more isolated than at any point in the last 2 decades. By mid-2025, soybean exports had fallen to their lowest level in 20 years, a staggering reversal for what was once one of the country's strongest global commodities. Much of this collapse can be traced to Beijing's retaliation. In response to tariffs from Washington, China sharply reduced its imports of American soybeans by an estimated 14 to 16 million tons per year. That's more than half of its previous demand evaporating almost oversate. A decline that analysts calculate as a loss of between $3.66 and $5.9 billion in annual production value for U.S. soybean farmers. Corn growers have not been spared either. They face additional losses of nearly $1 billion a year, as shipments are diverted elsewhere. On top of that, Chinese authorities imposed retaliatory tariffs worth roughly $21 billion on a broad range of U.S. agricultural and food products, further squeezing farmers who are already struggling to stay afloat. What was meant to be a tool of leverage in trade disputes has instead turned into a self-inflicted wound, one that cuts deeper each season. Still with us? Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's next. As if collapsing exports were not enough, farmers have also been crushed by rising production costs that seem to tighten like chains with each passing season. While crop prices tumble, the bills for keeping those farms running have moved in the opposite direction, creating a relentless squeeze. Since 2020, interest rates on farmland loans and operating credit have risen by more than 40%, making it significantly more expensive just to maintain the basics of production. For farmers already losing income, this surge in borrowing costs has turned routine financing into a high-stakes gamble. Fertilizer has been another heavy burden. The United States relies on Canada for the vast majority of its potash imports, around 80 to 85% of total supply. When a 25% tariff was applied, it translated into an additional $100 per ton, almost oversate. For corn producers, fertilizer alone made up roughly 22% of their total costs in 2024, meaning that every spike in input prices directly eroded already fragile margins. Even outside of potash, other essentials have followed the same trend. Ammonium fertilizer, a staple across U.S. farms, has climbed by more than 15% over the last 5 years. The result is a farm economy where costs keep rising even as selling prices slide, leaving producers trapped in a tightening vice with fewer and fewer options for relief. While American farmers wrestle with collapsing prices and rising costs, competitors abroad have been quick to seize the opening. The very trade disputes that have undercut U.S. agriculture have in effect created a golden opportunity for South America's grain powerhouses. Brazil in particular has moved to the front of the line. In recent years, it has overtaken the United States as China's top soybean supplier, a symbolic and strategic shift in global trade flows. Analysts estimate that under current tariff conditions, Brazil has been able to expand its annual soybean and corn exports by roughly 4.66 million tons cargo that might once have sailed from U.S. ports. Currency dynamics have played a role as well. A weaker Brazilian real has made its soybeans cheaper by nearly 70 cents per bushel compared to American supplies, a gap large enough to sway massive buyers like Beijing. For China, the math is simple. Cheaper imports that avoid political friction. For American farmers, it is another door closing. Argentina has also stepped into the vacuum, securing a reported $9 billion long-term agreement with the European Union to supply agricultural commodities in place of U.S. exports. What was once Washington's domain has increasingly become Buenos Aires' advantage. In this new geopolitical competition, every policy misstep in Washington is mirrored by gains in Sao Paulo or Buenos Aires. The global market has not waited for America to recover, it has simply moved on. Corn, long considered the crown jewel of American agriculture, has not escaped the storm. Despite producing a record 378 million tons in the 2024-25 season, more than any other nation, the United States finds itself increasingly sidelined in the very markets that once sustained its dominance. Abundance in this case has not translated into power. Exports to China, once a critical outlet for U.S. corn, have collapsed. Estimates suggest annual shipments have fallen by around 2.2 million tons, a drop of more than 80% compared with earlier baselines. This plunge is not simply a matter of changing diets or consumer preferences. It is the direct result of retaliatory tariffs that have made American corn both more expensive and less attractive. Beijing's countermeasures ranging from a 10 to 15% levy on U.S. corn and wheat have amplified the pressure. Every additional percentage point has tilted the playing field further in favor of South American competitors who can supply without political baggage. The financial consequences for U.S. producers are immediate and measurable. Market simulations indicate that corn prices could decline by 8 cents per bushel under a scenario where tariff exemptions are withdrawn, and by as much as 13 cents per bushel if duties were to climb towards 60%. For a sector already operating on razor-thin margins, even small price shifts can make the difference between survival and bankruptcy. The symbolism is just as powerful as the economics. A crop once central to America's global influence now struggles to hold its place on the world stage. The ripple effects of these losses extend far beyond the fields themselves. Every dollar that disappears at the farm gate sets off a chain reaction across rural America, dragging down local economies that depend on agriculture as their lifeblood. What begins as lower income for growers quickly becomes fewer purchases at equipment dealers, shuttered shops on Main Street, and shrinking tax revenues for schools and hospitals. For corn alone, analysts estimate that producers are losing between $900 million and $1.4 billion in annual value. When combined with soybean losses, the total economic hit reaches an estimated 4.9 to 9 billion in GDP each year. Such numbers are not abstract. They represent real livelihoods eroded, real communities forced into painful cutbacks. Local governments and farm-dependent regions have already been forced to trim budgets, reduce services, and watch as young people leave in search of more stable work elsewhere. Jobs tied to transport, logistics, and processing have evaporated along with export demand, leaving rural towns struggling to hold on. This economic paralysis is compounded by a reputational one. America's credibility as a reliable supplier of agricultural goods, already shaken during the 2018 trade war, has suffered another blow. Once lost, that kind of trust is difficult to rebuild, and every season of instability only deepens the doubts among global buyers. In short, what appears on the surface as an agricultural crisis is in reality a community crisis, one that eats away at both the economic and social fabric of rural America. For decades, American grain was more than food. It was a diplomatic weapon. Corn, wheat, and soybeans once secured Washington influence from Latin America to Asia. But that leverage is slipping, increasingly claimed by rivals with fewer political constraints. As U.S. exports decline, Brazil and Argentina have filled the gap, expanding acreage and building infrastructure that is reshaping global supply. Each new field in Matu or Cordoba not only boosts output, but shifts the balance of agricultural power. Meanwhile, buyers have grown cautious. Tariffs, retaliations, and sudden policy swings make U.S. shipments less reliable, pushing trade partners toward long-term deals elsewhere. The result is a steady erosion of what analysts call America's food soft power. Grain once amplified Washington's global voice. Now each lost contract weakens its diplomatic reach. The troubling question is simple. If food can no longer serve as a tool of influence, what remains? The crisis in American agriculture may seem severe, but many warn it is only the beginning. Without structural reform, farmers risk being trapped in a cycle of temporary relief. Instead of sustainable growth, the narrow path forward lies in diversification, moving beyond reliance on China and Mexico toward markets in India, Africa, and other emerging regions. Technology could also offer a lifeline. Drought-resistant seeds, AI crop management, and more efficient fertilizer use can cut costs while sustaining yields. But such progress demands long-term vision, not short-term subsidies. Without deeper policy reform, farmers may remain dependent on aid rather than competitiveness. The warning is clear. If the U.S. fails to adapt, its once dominant role as an agricultural superpower may slip permanently to others. And in a world where food is power, that loss would mean diminished influence as well as revenue. America now stands at a crossroads. Cling to old habits or embrace change. Which path will it choose? If this video gave you something to think about, like and subscribe to support more content like this. Thank you.